Hi, this is AZ Tryman, and this is our video that's going to cover sit-and-go tournaments. What I first want to mention is that cash games favor advanced players versus tournaments. Tournaments, especially sit-and-go tournaments, have some benefits for the beginning player. So I typically recommend that beginning players play sit-and-go tournaments. And the reason is that when blinds escalate and they get high enough, there are certain moves that you're just going to push all in with. So there's a lot less nuanced decision that needs to be made after the flop. In addition, when you make mistakes in cash games, they can cost 50 or 100 big blinds. In a tournament, you're potentially going to lose an entire buy-in, but you're not necessarily going to lose 100 big blinds, or you're not going to lose an amount of money that can damage you quite as quickly. Plus, with tournaments, there's a built-in stopgap. If you lose the tournament, you're out. You have a chance to take a break, review your strategy, decide whether or not you made the proper decisions, and hopefully improve your game. Generally, what you should assume about your opponents and how many hands you should play is going to be dictated by the independent chip model. The independent chip model is a model that says chips become worth more when there's fewer players involved in the tournament. Okay? Essentially, what I mean by that is when there's 10 players left in the tournament, you can't win the tournament. Right? Even if you take a coin flip and double up and you win your coin flip, you still have 9 players left. You still got to get through 6 players to get to the top 3. Right? So what's important is not accumulating a massive amount of chips early. What's important is making sure you don't put yourself in jeopardy early. So that leads right into our strategy. Here we go. Keep in mind that sit-and-goes require a major shift of gears later in the tournament. However, in the beginning of the tournament, you can play ultra tight. You could literally play nothing. You could sit out the first 3 or 4 blind levels and still be in just fine shape for the rest of the tournament. Right? Now that sounds a little bit silly, but it's true. So what we're going to do is we're going to play literally almost nothing. We're aces, kings, and queens. Maybe if you're in very late position, you could add on that. Otherwise, don't do it. Also, you want to make sure that when you get one of these premium hands, raise 5 times the big blind, 6 times the big blind. Don't be afraid to put in a big raise and play those hands aggressively. But again, you want to play extremely tight for 2 reasons. Number 1, the independent chip model says we should because we can't win the tournament when there's 10 players left. Number 2, we want to set up our image for later. Okay, I'll get into that in a minute. The next 2 blind levels, we want to play just regular tight aggressive ABC poker using chart number 1, which is our standard starting hands chart, tweaked a little bit for sit and goes. We want to play a little bit tighter than we would in cash games, so that the chart looks a little bit different than our typical starting hands chart. Blind number 7 and on, we want to make a huge shift in gears from tight aggressive to loose aggressive. Now, maybe you do that at level 6. What you really want to start to do is you really want to start to shift gears when you get around 10 to 12 M's. 10 to 12 complete big blind, small blind, and antes if there's antes. Now, Dan Harrington introduced the concept of M's in his tournament series, but it was initially done by Paul Magrill. And Paul Magrill is a brilliant mathematician and poker player. And basically what the strategy of M's or rounds means is it tells you how long you can wait around for a premium hand to play. Anytime you have less than 5 rounds, so big and small blind combined makes 1 M. Anytime you have less than 5, you're in the red zone, right? The red zone means you need to look to push all in almost immediately. Okay, so when we get to blind level 6, 7, and on, we need to shift and we need to go loose aggressive. Now, what we want to do is, I mentioned setting up our image. If we have set the proper image early, when there's 10, 9, 8 players left in the tournament, people are going to know that we're a tight player. We're going to be able to exploit that in the middle stage of the tournament, right around blind 5, 6, or 7. When there's 5, 6, or 7 people left in the tournament, we're going to increase our fold equity because of our tight image. What is fold equity? Fold equity means we raise, everybody folds. Okay, so when we start to shift gears, if we built the proper image and now we're shifting gears from tight aggressive to loose aggressive, people are going to fold to our raises. They're going to respect them. But it only works if you played tight up in the beginning part of the tournament. Sometimes it doesn't even work then because people aren't paying attention, but that's another story. When you have 5 to 7 M's left, we're going to look to start pushing the envelope a little bit harder, and we're going to look to go all in with top 25% of the hands. That's basically most pairs all the way down to, let's say, King Jack suited. Okay, we'll see that again here on our chart number 1. But again, when you have less than 5 M's, 5 big blinds, small blinds, you need to look to push all your chips in the middle with any reasonable hand in a pot that has not been opened. If someone opens a pot, understand that your fold equity is out the door in general. Okay, now maybe it's not. Maybe if you get one limper and you can push your entire stack and you can get them to fold as well. But in general, when you get down towards 5 big blinds or 5 M's, you need to be looking to go all in into an unopened pot. Okay, one more thing that I'll mention here before we leave this page is the idea of calling when you have mediocre cards if you're getting the right price. What is the right price? Generally, if you're getting 3 to 1, you could call in somebody's all-in raise with any 2 cards, and you're going to be in just fine shape. Okay, so that's important to know. That's why when you get around 5 M's or 4 M's, you need to push your chips all in before you get down to the point where somebody's going to call you your ace king with 7-2. 7-2's not as big of a dog to ace king as you would think. It's not as big of a dog if you've got an ace 7 and somebody else has got 8-9. You're in a not exactly a coin flip situation, but awfully close. So remember, don't wait until you get blinded down trying to squeak into third place. You want to make sure that you push the issue when you get down to around 5 M's. Okay, so here's our starting chart number 1. Even when we get past the first few blind levels, we're still going to play almost nothing in early position. We're going to loosen up a little bit in middle position. We're going to loosen up even more in late position. And we're especially going to be looking to call limpers and raise limpers from the button and from the cutoff seat. Okay, we don't necessarily want to be pushing too hard from the blinds. We mostly want to call there and look to see what develops on the flop because we will be playing the hand out of position. Pre-flop decisions. We're going to look to raise an unopened pot when we've got starting cards that meet our criterion, depending upon what level we're in and depending on where we're at in terms of our blinds, our M's relative to our chip stack. But we're going to look to raise an unopened pot, 3.5 times the big blind. If we're basically looking to make a pot size raise, even if we get a limper or 2 in front, if we've got cards that meet our strategy. The gap concept is much more important in tournament poker because the stack sizes tend to be less than the gap concept is in a cash game. In a cash game, you're going to have 100 big blinds. In most tournaments, after the first couple of blind levels, you're going to be down to 20 M's. Once you get down below 20 times the big blind, the gap concept becomes much more important. Okay, so the gap concept is more important in tournaments than it is in cash games, which again makes the cash game much more nuanced because your ranges are quite a bit higher than they are in tournaments. We're going to be looking for a reason to fold, especially up front and especially in the early blind levels. We're not necessarily going to look to play small pairs and connectors unless it's free, again, because the implied odds are much lower in a tournament because your stack sizes aren't as high. If you have 100 big blinds in your opponent's stack that you can win, playing a 4-5 suited sometimes makes sense. But when you're in a situation in a tournament where there's only, your opponent only has 15 big blinds, the implied odds just aren't there to play hands that need high implied odds like low pairs and suited connectors. I mentioned the 3-to-1 situation. If someone pushes all in on you and you're getting 3-to-1 on a call, almost if you're getting 2.7-to-1, you can call with just about any two cards. Decisions after the flop. You always want to ask the same questions that we ask in cash games. What's the best hand? What's the nuts on this flop? What's the texture? Are there two suited cards? Are there connected cards on this flop? Do we have a big pot hand which is 3 of a kind or better? Or do we have a small pot hand? Is it a hand like top pair, top kicker that we want to get to the showdown with as opposed to trying to push all in on the flop? In general, we want to be making continuation bets a lot in tournament poker, especially if we've established the image that we've prescribed here, which is a very tight, aggressive image up front. In the early part of the tournament, that's going to benefit us later as we're looking to make continuation bets. Keep this in mind, that in general, what we want to do is we don't want to push all of our chips into the middle on a draw, even if it has expected value, if we could get knocked out in 4th place. In general, we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the chance to get into the top 3 as opposed to making every single call unexpected value. So again, we don't want to throw away the profitable draws, but they do need to be better than marginally profitable in order for us to want to play draws in especially sit-and-go tournaments and especially late in sit-and-go tournaments. After the turn, we're basically going to ask the same type of questions that we've asked on the flop. What's the best hand? We now need to know what kind of action has there been. Have we seen raises and calls? Are people showing strength? We need to be. It's a little bit less important, as I mentioned. The cash game is much more nuanced, but you want to pay attention to what your opponent's bets mean. Then on the river, this is our standard chart where we show if we're looking to make a value bet, we want to be betting about 1/3 of the pot if we think we're likely best. If we're certainly best and hidden, we want to be betting 2/3 to the full pot. Okay, the review. Very, very tight in the early levels. Loosen up as we go. Once you get around to 5th, 6th, 7th blind level, we need to have completely shifted gears from tight aggressive to loose aggressive. Keeping in mind Harrington's M's. Harrington describes anything below 5 M's or 5 rounds of blinds as the dead zone or the red zone. You need to be looking to push all in, to hopefully get everybody to fold. Hopefully we've built up some fold equity by playing tight early on. In the 5 to 10 range, we're in the yellow zone. So in that yellow zone, we can still wait for premium hand, but once you get towards the low end of that 5 range, you certainly need to be looking to push. And then if you ever get to the point where you're down to 3-to-1, you absolutely push with virtually any 2 cards. So that's the general strategy. Tight early, loosen up as we go according to the independent chip model, and that's going to make you a profitable sit-and-go tournament player. Thanks a lot.